Good morning. We are going to be discussing Sicha, Parshas Shoftim, Chelek Chavtes, uh, Sicha Beis, the second Sicha. It's a very, very general, broad uh, discussion of the Sicha. Now, there are two parts to the Sicha. There is the first set, which is a Havamina. In other words, there brings that as a possibility to answer his question. But then he is matche that that can't be the answer for certain reasons, as we will discuss. However, he goes on with another answer, beautiful answer, which we're going to focus on the first half. Not the essay that he talks about in the first half, and he opens us up to a very, very important discussion, which I think is very important for us to everybody to know and hear about. And so basically, it begins with the fact that in the end of the Minyan HaMitzvahs, the Rambam writes, Elu heim sheish meyes shleish esrei mitzvah shenemar leisha Sinai. The Rambam is very into numbers, as we can see it through his Sefer and many places. And he brings details again that they're klolis and pratis, the mitzvah, he, teir shalpeh, and that's. And then he adds, v'yesh mitzvahs acheros, shenischatshu acha matan Torah, kavos neviim v'chachamim v'pashtu b'chol Yisrael, and he gives an example. There are other mitzvahs that have come after Matan Torah, and those are Mikra Megillah, Ner Chanukah, Tainus, Tisha B'Av, the Tainus of Tisha B'Av, the din of Yadayim, that I'm metam, washing the hands, the Erevin, v'yesh l'chol mitzvah me'elu, perushim v'digduk. So, the Rebbe is bothered by a very important question. How come the Rambam does not do what most people do and tell us that there are 7 mitzvahs, Rabbanan, or a number? And he brings that many times the Rambam is misakeim, and he goes and he writes every detail of what it is, and he counts them out, and then he writes the Sefer has 14 Svarim, and he explains every detail, and in each Sefer he writes how many halachas there are. It's a very number centric concept that the Rambam keeps focusing on because he is very accurate. So when it comes to the mitzvah of the mitzvahs, he writes 613. And he divides them up into mitzvah and mitzvahs leisas. And when it comes to the Rabbanon, nowhere does he write how many mitzvahs are there in the Rabbanon. Now, I just want to say the end answer of the Rambam is on one hand seems simple, but it's a very deep answer. But it requires a shear by itself, and that is that the mitzvahs that Rabbanan are in essence b'li. Okay, we'll leave it for now. That's his end answer, and numbers won't give them. You can't give numbers to them. That's one thing. Okay. So now we go to the next. So that wants to say, he offers an answer based on the famous thing that the Rambam writes Seif HaMitzvah Sheirish Aleph. And that is, this is the this is what we're going to focus on. Kol ma shama chacham la'asay say everything the Chachamim told us to do. Kol ma sheziru memenu kvar tziva Moshe Rabbeinu b'Sinai. Nothing new in the world. What Moshe says, it's Avenu l'kaimet. We got to listen to that. We have to listen to that because it comes from Moshe Rabbeinu. And he told us in this week's parasha, you got to do based on what they tell you. And he also told us, he warned us, don't go against it. Don't go away from what they say. You got to follow what they say. Okay, so how does that answer the question? We'll see. In Hilchis Mamrim, he goes through that Bezna Godel is there, the Ikakari Shoftim, they're the source of Piskei Halachis, Hayra. And they were told, based on them, you got to listen to them. Then he adds a line, a famous line, you got to rely on them. And then he goes on, you don't listen to them, you're you don't get Malchus. Why? Not because whatever. Should have got Malchus. Now this is a ingenious concept of the Rabbi. Why is it a lav shenit lazaris misneh? Why could you get killed for this? No death sentence in Rabbana. Oh, shekol chach shemer al devreya misaseh v'chenek because on zaken mamre is v'chenek. Yeah. So therefore, it becomes a mazharas misneh. And this is like an ingenious concept. There are other explanations which are not for now. The Rambam speaks about chametz and sheishos and so forth. There's tons of stuff. Okay. And then he goes on to say, all these things. Now, what are these? Anything they learned from the Yud Gimel Midos, and anything they made a siyog. Now, here's an interesting line in the Rambam. I just want to note it and not get into it. Hein agzeiros, v'hatakonos, v'haminhogos. Zeiros, laws. Takanos, laws. Minhogos, all under this heading, the Raisa. You have to all call echad v'echad me'ela shlosh devarim. Zeiros, takanos, minhogos. Mitzasei l'shmeilem v'oiva kolachem v'oiva loisasei. Okay, comes along the Ramban and it's the same mitzvah. He attacks the Rambam. He says he builds a big. This is Lash. He builds a beautiful wall, a big wall, not a big wall around the words of the Chachamim. But it's a wall that sinks and falls. He says it's a spoiled thought in most places in Talmud. You find clearly differences between the Rais and the Rabbanon. Them is, according to the Rambam, you should be able to get Malchus if somebody is metal muktzah or Amir Lakum. Yeah, Amir might be a problem. And the beauty of the Rishonim. Now, what about the Madonna says that old lav shenit lazaris misneh the lake and all? So you got Malchus. And then, why is there differences in the levels of the Rabbanans, the Raises? In Halacha, we find differences. I ask many, many questions. Okay. So, one of the approaches to answering this is as follows. The Rebbe brings. And it's common. It's out there, and many of them fresh. There is no lav to not to touch muktzah, not to move muktzah, or any of the drabanas. There's a lav not that you're. It's also not to listen to the chacham. In other words, it's not the heftza that's us. There's no iser on the object. It's only iser asiya that when you do it, you are not listening to the chacham. It's a general iser. And as the Rambam himself explains in in a couple of places where he explains how do you make a bracha, based on the Gemara and Shabbos, and he says, Nimtza inyan advarim v'hatzon kachu. This is what it means. He sanctified us with his mitzvah. Shetziva behel l'shmaya me'elu shetzivana lahad l'knei shochanike. Likras HaMegillah. So the mitzvah aren't detailed to the issue of the specific inyan, but they're all under one umbrella. Don't go against what the Chachamim say. Listen to them. The listening is the inyan, not the doing. And then he says, according to many, it's only Issa Gavra, that's the Rabbana, not to do with the Chefza, nothing to do with Megillah, nothing. It is the listening. When you don't do it, you're not listening to the Chacham. And I say, it's understood. Okay, now we can explain the Rambam. This is an incredible approach. Again, we're going to see, he's not chit. The Rambam can't hold like this, but there is such a shita. He says that therefore the Rambam doesn't write numbers because there's only one. Forget, he wants to tell you there is no numbers to the Rabbanan. There's only one Issa Rabbanan, one Mitzvah Rabbanan. There's not 7 mitzvahs or 10 mitzvahs. It's one mitzvah. That's it. Like Sasser. Mitzvah Lishmaya. However, the Rebbe rejects that pshat. That can't be pshat in the Rambam. Why? They can understand. The Rambam has a question both in Sefer HaMitzvahs, he has the question, and in Yad HaChazaka. Why aren't mitzvahs Rabbanan considered a over alav l'seisiv? You're being meisiv on the Yisrael Drais? And he explains because they're not saying that it's a mitzvah that's being meisiv in the Torah. They're not being meisiv. They're just telling you Shanaviyim and Bezin Tiknu and Tzivu Likras Megillah. They're not saying the Torah meant this. We are saying this. We are adding this. Like the Rebbe, if it were true that the Rambam holds a mitzvah but not one mitzvah, what kind of question is this? Why in the world would you think that there is a leisasur, that there would be leisasifu? There's nothing that the Chacham are doing. The Chacham just telling you, don't do this, and the Isser is the Raisa, and a separate Isser. They're not telling you, they're telling you things to do. They don't like to tell you things to do, and they're not making a mitzvah. The mitzvah is not what they're telling you. The mitzvah, you just got to listen to them. Okay, and we're gonna discuss now this lav shenit lazar misbezin for a moment. Ram says in Perek Dal Halach Aleph, this guy who was Chelek on the Bezin Agadol, which we said before, was what causes that you shouldn't get malchus on his Rabbanon. So he says, even if he said it has to be bedavish shechiyam as then cars or she goes chatas, right? You can't just stop argue on anything. It has to be davish. It has to be something that is chayiv chorus b'zelden and she goes chatas. Now it comes up with this is what we mentioned before. What if he argued as follows? Chometz, we know, is usher from chatzos of Erev Pesach till after Pesach. What about he was mater chometz v'yem arba usher b'nissen b'shar shishis? He said that it's mutter on that day. Or faket, he said it's usher b'no b'shar shishis. It's not. It's only usher b'achila. Harei zeh chayiv misa. Why? Because he is dealing with chametz, and chametz is a. So zok the radvaz. Why? What? Why? Kiva shem ro leagues of shoshes, and therefore kiva the ikke chametz yesh by kares. Even though what you're arguing about in the 5th hour, no, the 6th hour is not a kares issue, it's a drabanan. And that hour is only exerce chachamim. Nerag. The time have a kadesh lir machlekes v'isur. So the Gesem Mishnah says another one. That was a push. Somebody's mekadesh b'chametz v'sheisha islamayla. It's kedusha, not kedusha. So therefore, it's a shayla of each ish. You know, the famous shayla is like, you'll need some mekadesh and a woman. That was the Welt says on many, and I've seen this question asked on everything is really a Rabban. Every Rabbanan is a drais. Why? If you're mekadesh a woman on the condition that this iser the Rabbanon is yes or no, and if it's not or whatever, if she keeps the kedusha is bottle. And the kedusha is kayim, and somebody lives with her, then it's a ish. It's isur. I mean, every shaila becomes negated to cars. So the Ramban says that in such a case, if it was matter davish is the cars in a chametz rabbanan, it's not a case of Zakim Mamre, because he's not going against the Torah. He's going against the Rabbi. Oh, the Chaim is brought in the name of Rabbi. It's in the stencils. Explains what is the Machlek is the Rambam and the Ramban exactly the way the Rebbe explains the Rambam. That according to the Rambam, it's a din in chametz, like the Rebbe says. The Rambam holds it's a din in chametz. It's a din in protius. It's a protius the is. Therefore, it's an issa chametz. The Ramban holds that it's not an issa chametz. It's an issa of not listening to the chachamim. So that idea is talui in this machlekes. And it's a double passion that you have to say like that according to the Rambam, it must be an issa chametz. It's another ayah to the point that the Rambam can't hold that it's a klolis the case. The Chiddush of Chaim is that that's what the Ramban holds, but that's the machlekes. Okay. Now let's take a look at another halach. Sounds like a totally coming from left field. In Hilchas Mechira, Perik Dazayin Aloch Yudala, the Rambam writes, listen to this halach. Ameicha basa l'chaveir v'nimtza basa b'cher. You sold basa, a piece of meat, and it ended up being, it's not regular meat, it's basa b'cher. You sold peiris and a tevel. Wine, it's yain nesach. Whatever the guy mistakenly ate, achal, he ate already. The yagzel is adamim. He has to pay back. He ate it at double usser. You gave him a double usser. Even if he ate it, pay him. Now listen to these words. Doesn't matter. Anything that's also not Torah, there's nothing to talk about. Oh, now listen to this. Something that's only awesome in the Rabbanon. And it does nothing. Of course, he has a right to give it back. I said, that's like I didn't want that. But if he ate it, the Meicher is potter from everything. Look, the Magen Mishnah, I haven't found any source for this. All I know is that the Gemara only talks about Yisur D'Raisa or Yisur Hano D'Rabbanan. You shall maybe find a different Legap Schayra. So comes along the Smet or the Sma. I always, as a kid, I was taught Sma, but I learned that others say Smet. Explains the Rambam that by a D'Raisa, only by D'Raisa they were canceling. Also, when you eat a dava also, you had no pleasure. You're disgusted by it. Mashenka, when you listen to Rabbanan, Shach near there explains the reason and says the haim like gozu isik de leitzi mamen ukmu adin tayo. When it comes to mamen, you gotta go according to the tayo then. You can't just make a takana to take away somebody's money. Therefore, the Nesivis has a Horus on the Shach. If the Mecca is Batli, he's a Mazik. So what's going on there? What's this Rabbon on the Raisa? Listen to this line. Zok in the Nesivis. Efsh. The Abi Surah Torah afiloichem b'shegig tzorach kapara trumel hagmaz. You eat something b'shegig, you'd have kapara. But in Issa D'Rabbanan, you do it b'shegig, you're free. And he brings a raya from a Gemara in Erevin. The Gemara says that some psak alocha b'drabbanan avdinen uvda v'hadam esvinen tiyuvd. We don't deal with it. The guy says it's good, it's good. The basic says it's good. Then, even though there's somebody who doesn't like what he's saying, he said it's good, it's good. Rely on him. He said, but what else? How do you allow that? Says, Rabbanan b'shegig does not know this. Therefore, you don't have to pay. The rest you have to pay. Rabbanan, you ate it, finished. Rashi is exactly. Be'isr shal Torah v'chacham meir behet. V'yesh b'tamidim shlei lo yoshev koydem ha'me'isr shal nyav be'isr. Al divid Torah al b'drabbanan ken yeru b'chatzeres shaftina l'chacham lasses keirosai. And then later talk about it. The Radvaz says in a case, all over the land, I don't know if you know this, he says in the stop adinim, and you can go look it up. He says the Rabban then is not talking about only when the Rav says it's clearly like that. Okay, whatever. So the Yisaitis that we're talking about, does all this fit with the Nesivus? The Yisait of the Nesivus is Pashtus. I mean, there are different approaches. I get into all the different, but according to the way the understanding of the Nesivus is, that what's the issue? The issue is not to listen. You're not listening to the Chachamim, right? And he's saying this in the Rambam. So if the issue is not listening, then you say b'shegig. You didn't go against the Chachamim. But if it's an issue that the thing is usher, well, who can't shegig to that? Oh, amazing. So the Chasam writes that every bound is the Raisa. Let's say Chazal hisnu b'tchilas takanoshi. Yeah, v'yechel shegig. Lo yam lo yik yechel shegig is a shegig. But it's hard to say that in the Nesivos. That's not his losh. So let's understand, does the Nesivos fit with when the Rebbe and explains in the Rambam, and it's muchrach in the Rambam? How can the Nesivos say this in the Rambam? The Rambam says clearly so many things that indicate that it's an Isser on the Proteus. So the Rebbe brings in the order there a Rabbi Yosef Engel, Nasim the Raisa, just notes it. But I think if we go through that Asim the Raisa and understand what he's saying, we can understand what's going on. The Rabbi Yosef Engel says, "Amei the Kavod," brings a Medrash Tanchuma. Ilamdeinu Rabbeinu, teach us. Ner Chanukah she'isa b'Shem and b'Yemri shema ladu v'sheinu. And goes on that you can do it. And then he ends up like this. So till then, you can use it with mitzvah. You can always add. Now listen to the end of that medrash. I don't want to listen to the Chacham. Not min HaTorah. Amal HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'milonai. Ein atam mishayin lemiken. Elokol ma shegoyzem aleichem tiyu mekayim mishenem avasisa al pi HaTorah shirucha. Lo mash'af al devreim ani maskim. Tigzahim me'eva yokim lach. So you want to say like this. What's the connection to Muktzah of Ner Chanukah today? So he says like this. This is this issue of whether Isurei Torah are Isser Chefetz or not. So he says like this. The Chacham can't make an Isser Chefetz. It doesn't belong to them. An Isser Chefetz can only be made by the one who the Torah, who the world belongs to. Amazing about. The Eibush is the only one that can do it. So how does an Muktzah go on their Chanukah? The Chacham can't make it Muktzah. So he says that the way it works is the Eibush is saying, yeah, they can't. But now that they made the Yisra, I'm making the Yisra Chet. In other words, I'm listening to them is not just listening to them. That creates the Eibush to now saying, it's my world. I am agreeing with them. So listen to the Yisayid here. There's a myriad depth in what he's saying. Be'etzem, Isurei Chachamim are not Isurei Chefetz. Midrabanon. It's about listening to the Chachamim. But who told you to listen to the Chachamim? The Eibishter. And since by him is Lashem Arsalai, this is what he brings. So that creates a din on the Chefetz. Okay, now it's the Chefetz is only because the Eibishter is maskim al yadam, and that's why it becomes down as a Chefetz. So be'etzem, really, all mitzvahs Rabbanan should be nichlal, even according to the way the Rebbe says it, and even according to the way everybody, it's muchach in the Rama. It should have been nichlal in one. But the Yiddish is that now the Eibishter intervenes and says the Rabbi Yosef Engel, it becomes now an Issur Chefetz. Oh, he does. Hey, everything is beautiful. The Nesivos can fit with everything we said. It has to begin by not listening, says the Nesivos. If there is no not listening, there's no Eibushter getting involved and saying Ani maskim al yodam, and now it's an Issur Chefetz, or now it's a real Issur. Protisdik is. And since it's shagig and you didn't listen, you did not listen. It was a shagig. It never goes under that Isser and never becomes an Issachet. Hashenkin, every other Drabanan becomes an Issachet because of that. Now we have to go back to the Rebbe Zahara. Why did the Rambam worry about the Inyan of Baltaisif? If it's a general Isser. That is because it begins as a general Isser. But since through them is being Chal an Isser on the heavens, that would be a Shaila Baltaisif, unless you say they have to say clearly we're not doing it. That would, in other words, it's got that. It's like two steps. I do this, and then we do this. It's all one. It becomes one. That's what they're doing. Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu maskim al yodam, now they can do it. Oh, but that won't work in this case. That won't work. But if it's a shaggy, it doesn't even begin to be an isser. So once it's an isser, it immediately becomes an isser hefzer. Then there's a shayla. I must explain it. Okay, Ad Kan. Everybody, sei gesund und stark. And Atzlacha Rabbi, sei gesund.